There are secrets history tried to bury, not in locked vaults or forbidden archives, but in plain sight hidden behind marble facades and sunlit canals, hidden behind paintings tourists photograph without understanding what they are really looking at. What if everything you were taught about Venice was incomplete? What if the floating city of romance was, in truth, something colder, something far more calculating? What if Venice did not simply trade goods but engineered the very idea of money itself? This is not a story about gondolas or lovers' bridges. This is a story about ledgers, silence, and power. And once you see it, you will never look at Venice the same way again. For centuries, the world has believed a comforting myth. Venice, the miraculous republic, a city that rose from mud and salt water through ingenuity alone. A beacon of trade, diplomacy, and art. A place where East met West, peacefully, where merchants replaced kings, where contracts mattered more than crowns. Historians call it the first modern republic. Tour guides call it the Queen of the Adriatic. Textbooks praise its stability, its tolerance, its brilliance. They say, Venice grew rich because it was clever, because it was fair, because it understood commerce better than anyone else. But myths are often built to hide contradictions, because while Venice preached freedom of trade, it quietly perfected control. While it celebrated civic equality, it entrenched invisible hierarchy. And while it claimed to be a city of merchants, it was slowly becoming something else entirely. A bank disguised as a nation. The contradiction begins with geography Venice ad no, farmland. No forests. No mines. No natural wealth. What it had instead was necessity. Survival here required coordination, trust, and rules enforced without mercy. From the very beginning, Venice learned that chaos meant death, and so order became sacred. The earliest Venetians pooled risk before they pooled profit. They shared ships. They shared losses. They shared information. And most importantly, they recorded everything. Every transaction. Every debt. Every promise. Money, in Venice, was never just currency. It was memory. Slowly, almost, the city transformed trade into something abstract. Coins mattered less than credit. Silver mattered less than reputation. A man's word, stamped and archived, became worth more than gold. To understand what this meant, you have to leave the palaces and step into the shadows. Imagine a dockworker in the 12th century. Calloused hands, salt in his beard. He carries crates of spice, worth more than he will earn in a lifetime. He does not own them. He will never taste them. He moves wealth he cannot imagine, for a system he cannot see. Above him, in quiet rooms, lit by oil lamps, sit men who never touch the cargo. They touch paper instead. Contracts, bills of exchange. Letters of credit. These men are not kings. They wear no crowns. They call themselves citizens. But their power is absolute. As Venice expanded its reach from Constantinople to Alexandria, from Bruges to London, it exported more than goods. It exported trust. On its own terms, Venetian credit became a passport. Venetian contracts became law. Venetian accounting methods spread across Europe like a silent language. Double-entry bookkeeping did not emerge by accident. It emerged because Venice needed to see everything at once. Profit and loss, risk and reward, truth and illusion. Every debit had a credit. Every action had a consequence. Nothing could be allowed to vanish. By the 13th century, Venice had institutionalized this obsession. State-controlled banks appeared not to serve the people but to stabilize power. De Banco di Realtoleta, de Banco Guiduri. These were not banks as we imagine them today. They were instruments of discipline. Merchants were required to keep accounts there. Large transactions had to pass through them. The state could see flows of money the way generals see troop movements. And with vision came control. When merchants failed, Venice did not merely punish them, it reset them, names struck from records. Families ruined quietly. No public spectacle, no trials worth remembering. Silence was the system, yet publicly, Venice denied everything. It insisted it was not a tyranny. It insisted no one truly ruled the duke. After all, was elected. Councils debated. Votes were cast. But elections can be rituals, not choices. Behind the ceremonial masks was a rigid oligarchy, a closed circle of families whose names appeared again and again in the ledgers. Their power did not come from violence. It came from access. Access to credit. Access to information. Access to the state's financial bloodstream. By the time ordinary Venetians realized what was happening, it was too late. They lived inside a machine that no longer needed their consent. The human cost rarely appears in the paintings. Consider the small traders, crushed by currency manipulations. The foreign merchants whose assets were frozen during emergencies. The sailors paid in delayed wages, while interest accumulated elsewhere. Venice rarely stole outright. It simply changed the rules mid-game. And because everything was legal, no one could scream. The records tell this story quietly. Allow passed in 1277, restricting noble membership. Another tightening control over state debt in the 14th century. The creation of forced loans prestige fat citizens could not refuse. These loans funded wars. They funded fleets. They funded expansion. But they also bound the population to the state through debt. You were no longer just a citizen. You were an investor who could not cash out. Publicly, Venice called this shared sacrifice. Privately, elites traded these debts among themselves, consolidating wealth. The city was no longer floating on water. It was floating on obligation. And still, the world applauded. Foreign rulers marveled at Venice's stability. Popes borrowed from it. Kings depended on it. Empires trusted Venetian bankers to move fortunes across borders without armies. Venice did not conquer lands, the way Rome did it. Conquered balance sheets, but denial is a powerful anesthetic. When critics emerged, they were dismissed as jealous rivals. When whispers of manipulation surfaced, they were buried under pageantry. Carnivals, festivals. Art, so much art, because art distracts. Art beautifies power. Art turns systems into stories. If you are still listening, this is where it becomes uncomfortable. Because Venice did not collapse under its own corruption. It succeeded. Its methods were copied. Refined. Globalized. Amsterdam learned from Venice. London learned from Amsterdam. Modern central banking did not appear from nowhere. It evolved from this lineage of quiet control. Documents preserved in Venetian archives confirm it. Correspondence between bankers and senators. State minutes discussing interest rates centuries before economists existed. Legal codes designed to protect institutions, not people. Scholars argue over intent. Was this genius or greed? Was Venice protecting itself or slowly hollowing itself out? There is no simple answer, because the same system that crushed individuals also prevented chaos. The same financial discipline that enriched elites also fed populations. Venice rarely starved. It rarely revolted. Was that stability worth the price? This is the moral dilemma history refuses to resolve. And now, look around you. Look at how money moves digitally, invisibly, instantly. Look at how nations speak the language of credit ratings and bond yields. Look at how citizens are bound not by chains, but by contracts they did not negotiate. Venice is not gone. It is multiplied midway through this story. If you find yourself unsettled, if it's changing how you see history, consider staying with us. These stories are not meant to comfort. They are meant to reveal, because, in the end, Venice teaches us something deeply disturbing. That power does not need armies. It needs accountants. That control does not announce itself. It whispers, records, and waits. So ask yourself, as the lights fade over the Grand Canal, was Venice a miracle of human cooperation or the prototype of financial domination? When money replaces force, who really wins? And if a city can become a bank, what does that make the world we live in now?